My name is Bernie DeSantis, and I am the owner of Insignia Training Partners. Insignia is a full service learning and development company that provides fractional support. That's the new word, fractional, for training strategy, design, development, and deployment. If that doesn't necessarily resonate with you, or you're asking yourself, what in the heck does that mean? That's really a fancy way of saying we are a training broker. So what we do is connect organizations who have training needs with the right resources and people to build out world-class training programs and courses at ultimately a fraction of the cost of hiring all of those resources internally. What does that look like? That could be fractional chief learning officers, for organizational development, enablement, and training strategy, designers to build out the courses, instructors and facilitators to teach the content, coaches to follow up and reinforce what was learned, project managers to obviously manage the programs and help with change initiatives, LMS administrators to track the learning, voiceover actors to support the e-learning development, and of course, virtual producers for online event support. We are industry, product, service, and subject matter agnostic, and I will even, dare I say, client size agnostic. I am a firm believer that whether you're a company of one or a company of 1 million people, there is learning happening every single day. Either you are consuming it or you are deploying it. And in either case, Insignia is built on training experts, and we can help. Now, while we will always do project or fractional work, I'm focusing on ultimately solving one major issue. I want to help people and businesses to make more money and gain new clients from their virtual events. And how we do that is by helping them to create really engaging webinars, workshops, and masterclasses that ultimately serve as a business development activity, right? The idea being that people don't show up to events that they're not interested in. So if they are showing up to a virtual event that you're hosting, chances are they are already thinking about the product and or services that you're selling. Now, most content creators and subject matter experts either struggle to fill the seats or they're struggling to convert people who show up to those events into paying clients for a variety of reasons. Now, as a service, Insignia won't sell for you, but ultimately we can help you to put on a really great virtual event that your ideal clients will lean into. Now, if there's one thing that I've learned over the years, it's that engaged audiences are primed to buy. And it's really honestly that simple. Now, of course, simple doesn't always mean easy, right? The flip side of that is unengaged or disengaged audiences. Well, they're not really going to buy from somebody who's boring or that doesn't engage them or runs a crappy event. Since the beginning of COVID, when the world shut down, Insignia has helped companies both large and small to deliver over 5,000 engaging virtual training courses, workshops, webinars, masterclasses, or whatever you want to call the virtual events. Our clients do include some blue chips, which include Ernst & Young, Johnson & Johnson, and McKinsey. But we've worked with a ton of smaller organizations like the Get Real Project, Trusted Advisor Associates, and Gerard Training Solutions, as well as plenty of solo coaches and consultants alike. Regardless of whether you're a solopreneur or a Fortune 100 company or anywhere in between, if you're doing virtual events, you need to set yourself apart by creating engaging experiences for your attendees. And if it's just about the learning, you can make it stick, again, by engaging your audience. And that's ultimately why you're here today, right? So let me go ahead and get my deck up and we will get rolling. Screen one, there we go. All right, confirmation. Yep, it is showing. Perfect. All right, so quick story. Let's go back in time for a moment to 2020 when the world shut down. And quite frankly, everyone had to go virtual due to COVID. But 98% of people had no friggin' clue what they were doing. Insignia at the time was contracted by Ernst & Young to produce their virtual training courses. And if you don't know, EY is a global tax and advisory firm. They have close to 500,000 people globally. And you may be shocked to hear that an organization of that size actually had a really small training team, just a few hundred people by comparison to the overall population. Now, they were still doing about 70% of their trainings in person when COVID hit. So as you can imagine, when it hit and they had to go 100% virtual, it was a big lift and shift for them. Now, a large majority of their courses were for certified professional education, also known as CPE. And these courses were being delivered not by their training team, but by subject matter experts from within the business. These were tax advisors, accountants, financial advisors, and the likes, not trained trainers or people with experience delivering training programs. So you can imagine, again, that when COVID hit, it was tough for them to make that shift. And let me tell you that it was dumpster fire after dumpster fire after dumpster fire after dumpster fire after dumpster fire in those early days. No one would come on camera. Participants dropped out of the meeting, blaming oftentimes poor internet. But those who stuck around had almost zero participation. And again, these were courses that were required, certified professional education credits for those employees to keep their professional licensing in order to continue doing business. The reason was that ultimately many of the facilitators thought they could take that in-person content, just jump in Zoom, deliver exactly the same way, and they would get the same results. Obviously, they were wrong. They talked at people, they didn't use the tools available to them, and they didn't engage the audience at all. So you would join these Zoom meetings or a webinar and find that even the facilitator themselves was off camera, or they weren't in frame, or their audio was grainy and garbled, or sounded like they were talking through a fishbowl, and no one knew how to use any of the platform features like polls or breakout rooms effectively. I mean, let's be honest, people were still struggling even just to share their screen at the time. So what would happen? The participants would get frustrated, they would get bored, they would get distracted, and then they would, again, drop out of that meeting. And oftentimes with a terrible taste in their mouth for that virtual training experience. So how did we help? Insignia provided over 50 producers to EY to help them manage the virtual classroom for every single virtual training and event they did for over 2 years. And we saw participation and engagement do a complete 180. Okay. Participants then stayed on camera. They didn't drop out during breakout rooms. They responded to chats. They answered the polling questions. So fast forward to today, right? Some people have become really, really good at delivering virtual training programs. And honestly, kudos to them for figuring it out on their own. And I won't say that I'm perfect by any means. Probably still have a lot to learn, but I would also like to think that I'm better than most because of the volume of events that we've produced and that I facilitated. So I'm going to share some things with you today that, are really from a producer perspective and not from a speaker or trainer perspective. Okay. Let's be honest, guys. Some people still really suck at delivering virtual events. They are making the same mistakes and putting on dumpster fire events left, right, and center and calling them masterclasses. And it's not ultimately that they don't want to do a great job or that they don't know their content, but rather they don't know what they don't know about delivering virtually. And I call that unconscious incompetence. And I would, in fact, encourage you to go on LinkedIn and scroll your feed for just even 5 minutes. And I can almost guarantee that you'll find a dozen masterclasses that you can go to, and unqualified number, my number, probably an 80% chance that it's going to suck. So please don't be that person after today's event. And I'll also add that if you're going to run virtual events, guys, don't Zoom alone. Okay. Don't do it by yourself. Multitasking is overrated at best, but a complete fallacy at worst. If you're going to deliver great content, you have to be focused on delivering your content and engaging with the people that are in your event, not worried about the breakout room or the polling questions or sharing videos or any of the stuff that ultimately you need to do in order to create an engaging virtual training program. So with that, let's dive into Audience Alchemy, facilitating virtual training that doesn't suck. So first tip, always share your objective with your attendees, or multiple objectives if you have multiple. Confirm for them that they are in the right room and what they're going to take away from the event. So at least you can meet expectations, right? And today we have only one objective. We will identify virtual facilitation best practices and talk about the engagement features that are available in the standard version of Zoom. These will be things that you can and should implement immediately into your next virtual training, workshop, webinar, masterclass, or event, any and all of the above. So these are the ground rules for today. And guys, kind of pulling back the curtain, it's always good to set the ground rules with your participants, right? It lets them know why they're there and what they should do to participate in your event. Now, for me, number 1 and number 5 are most important out of this list. I'd like to see participation. And again, if you're available to come on camera, I'd love to see you on camera. And number 5, avoiding distractions. But I'd like to hear from you as well. If you would, please pop open your chat panel and drop in just the number or multiple numbers of what you think are most important for us today. I'll give you a second to do that. All right, so Peyton says number 5 and number 2. So sharing your knowledge, experience, and best practices and avoiding distractions. All right, Dave and Chris, I'd love to hear from you as well, but I'm going to continue on for the sake of time. But again, pop in the number that you feel is most relevant or most important to you. So I want to talk very specifically about number 5, avoiding distractions, right? So I personally work from 7 monitors, and I'm not saying that to impress anyone, but ultimately to illustrate a point. There is plenty in the virtual environment when people are working from home that can distract people, right? The truth is, working from 7 monitors, I have Zoom on one, right? The one right directly in front of me. But this one over here, I have my email on. This one over here, I have LinkedIn on. This one over here, I have Teams on. This one over here, I have Slack on. This one over here, I have Facebook on. And guess what? This one that's currently turned off, I could be watching a baseball game on, right? And that's just talking about the monitors. There are also a lot of other environmental factors that can distract people, right? I personally have 2 kids, 2 dogs, 2 cats, and a wife that are all upstairs moving around doing stuff that could potentially be a distraction for me as well if I were a participant in your virtual event, right? So think about that for a second. How many distractions are there for you as a participant in a virtual event? And then flip that around. How many distractions are there for you as a facilitator, right? So taking a step back for a second, there are people who are still actually working from only one monitor. And I highly, highly recommend, if you are facilitating virtual events, that you get a second monitor. And if you have 2, maybe even a third. Even if it's just a small portable monitor that you only use when you're facilitating events that you can plug and play, it honestly makes a huge difference when you're facilitating. If you're trying to share a deck and run all of the meeting stuff at the same time, it's exceptionally hard. And honestly, I haven't met anyone who doesn't struggle to manage it all from just one monitor. Peyton, maybe Donnie, but I'm pretty sure he has at least 2 monitors as well. So, quick question from everybody. And again, use the chat. Why is it important to get your group's consensus on the ground rules? Why is that an important piece for your virtual training? And Dave, thank you for saying 5, 2, and 1 for setting the tone. Why is it important to set the ground rules and get your group's consensus on the ground rules? So Peyton says setting expectations. Absolutely. That is priority number 1, right? You let them know how they should be interacting and behaving within the virtual training. Chris says boundaries. Absolutely, right? You don't want people talking about, let's just say, politics as an example, right? That can ruffle some feathers. So you want to make sure to let people know what the ground rules are. And Dave says, get everyone on the same page and know how to interact. Absolutely. You guys are 100% correct. Thank you for participating in that. So here's our agenda for today. I'm going to keep it pretty simple. And guys, always share your agenda with your participants as well, even if it is just a slide on screen, right? So today we're going to talk again about best practices. I'm going to show you a funny clip, or at least one that I think is funny. We're going to talk about how you leverage the virtual platform features. We're going to talk just a little bit about how you fill your virtual seats if you're doing a virtual event as a business development activity. And then we'll do a quick lessons learned and wrap up with just a small bit of networking involved as well. All right. So Joey, if you'd please launch polling question number 1. I'd like to hear from you guys. What is your level of confidence when you are facilitating a virtual event? Right? Is it low, moderate, or high? Go. And we've got 3 responses. Joe, if you go ahead and end and share. So we've got 1 with moderate, 2 with high. Kind of to be expected based on what I know about you guys already. So that's actually really good. We're going to, obviously, one of you that's moderate, I'm going to try to get you to a little bit higher confidence level. And those of you who are high, my goal ultimately is to take you to a slightly higher level. Hopefully you'll take at least 1 or 2 nuggets away that you can use in your next virtual event. All right. So another engagement opportunity. Chat question. What are some examples that you have personally witnessed that have made a virtual training bad? What are some things that have made training suck in this type of environment? Yep. Peyton, I agree. Bad audio always drops the experience to immediate zero. And we are obviously going to talk about that a little bit. Chris, no direction, too much to cover and not enough time. Absolutely. Dave says failure to prepare, as with any medium, lack of engaging the audience. Yep. All of you guys are 100% correct. And obviously I have a little bit of a list that I'll share with you guys as well. Peyton, distractions. Yep, absolutely. So here's my list. Presenter is unprepared or unfocused. Presenter doesn't know how to use the platform. The presenter asks you to participate in chat, but then doesn't read the chats. They don't ask for participation at all. This one may be a little bit out of your control, but technical issues, right? Sometimes you just have poor internet bandwidth and that sucks, but there's not necessarily a lot that you can do about that specifically. Audio or video issues, difficulty logging in. If somebody has a hard time just getting into your event, that is an immediate turnoff. Poor transitions to activities, waiting around for something to happen. Guys, respect people's time. Doesn't start or end on time is a huge pet peeve of mine personally. And then, you know, one of the worst ones, and maybe it's not necessarily one of the worst ones, but it certainly sucks. The speaker is just boring, right? They're Ben Stein's teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? It's just monotone and they're talking at you the entire time. And I'm sure that there are other things that potentially pop up that can make a virtual training suck. But if you're doing the things that I'm going to talk about today, you will have a more engaging virtual training event. All right. So let's dig into lights, camera, action. So these are some fairly well-known things that really you should pay attention to. But honestly, it's worth reiterating because I see people miss on this stuff all of the time that tell me that they are doing virtual events all of the time, which obviously shocks me that no one has ever shared it with them before. So first and foremost, guys, being on camera in and of itself alone is engaging, okay? Your body language communicates. So be on camera. You're probably familiar with the Moravian communication model, right? Which is 7% is your words, 38% is your tone or your pace, and then 55% is your body language or your physiology. So just because you're on camera and it doesn't show half of your body does not mean that your body language is not communicating, okay? So be on camera because it is engaging and it does communicate. When you're talking about your camera, right, and being on camera, your camera in and of itself, the hardware, should be at or slightly above your eye level. The reason for this is actually in regards to your audio, because it forces you to look up, which extends your vocal cords and allows you to project better, okay? Always look at the camera at least from time to time. The reason that you do this is at an in-person event, you're going to be scanning the room, right? You're going to go around, but occasionally you're going to stop and you're going to look somebody directly in the eye. And that creates engagement. The way that you simulate that in the virtual environment is by looking directly into your camera. That is the same as eye contact in an in-person event. So even if you have to read your slides and you're occasionally looking down, take the time to periodically look up into your camera because that is a way to connect with your audience, okay? And guys, make sure that you're centering yourself as much as possible, right? You may not necessarily have a zoom function, a zoom in function with your camera, but you want to be framed as well as you can. And the general rule of thumb is you want to use the 3-finger rule. And the 3-finger rule is if you can fit 2 to 3 fingers on top of your head and it reaches the top of your frame on camera, you are framed correctly. What you don't want is to be on camera, right? You got about 4 fingers there, Peyton, so you've got a little bit of room, but you're centered well, right? And Joey, you are centered properly. But what you don't want is to show up on camera and be down here like this. I see it all of the time, and it looks friggin' terrible, guys. Don't do that, okay? Make sure that you are centered appropriately within your frame. So let's move on just a little bit. Oh, actually, one other thing I want to mention. If you're working from a laptop that has an internal camera, it's a little bit harder to position your camera at a different space, right? So use a few books or a box to raise up the level of that laptop closer to eye level as much as possible. Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't like staring up somebody's nose for an hour-long training program, okay? So if you're using a laptop, raise up its level just a little bit so that's closer to eye level for you. All right, so the next section is around background and lighting. So I personally am a huge fan of virtual backgrounds, right? Why is that? Well, one is I have branding, right? Both Joey and I have Insignia Training Partners virtual backgrounds that are branded. So I like that personally, mostly because I don't have a neutral or uncluttered background behind me. I think it looks very, very distracting. I'm going to turn off my virtual background for a second just to give you a peek. And if you ever tune in, and obviously Peyton, you do for our podcast, you know exactly what my background looks like. And take off the blur, right? So obviously I've got my mini bar over here. I've got my Iron Man light back here. I've got my shut the fuck up Donnie thing back here from the Big Lebowski. It's distracting, right? It could potentially be distracting from people. The second piece of that is in regards to your lighting, right? Lighting is super important. If you're going to be on camera, be well lit, right? You want people to see your facial expressions and you smiling and your hand gestures. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but you want to make sure that you are facing the brightest light source that you can. And ideally, you want to use natural light. So if there is a way to position your camera directly in front of a window and it's daytime, that is the best light that you can have. If that's not an option, you want to use ring lights or cube lights. Personally, I have 2 ring lights on either side of my camera. One has more of a yellow color and the other one's a little bit more of a white color, but it shines on me pretty well. You can see my facial expressions. You can see when I bring my hands in, it looks pretty good, right? But I'm going to turn my cameras off for a second, or excuse me, my lights off for a second. And you're not going to notice a really significant difference, but you can tell the difference. I look more lit in a blue light, right? This is just the light coming from my 7 monitors that are on. Is it terrible? No, it's a little bit softer light, but it's really not a very good light experience. So I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. And Joey, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and spotlight yourself. So Joey is fairly well lit right now, right? You can see him. He looks pretty good. This is how most people light themselves, generally speaking. So Joey, I'm now going to ask you to turn off your light for a second.
Welcome to my cave.
Right. So Joey is now in what I refer to as the witness protection look, right? You can still kind of see his face a little bit, right? You can see just saw him blink his eyes, but there are some folks that operate in almost complete darkness and you can't see them at all. Guys, if you're going to be on camera and you're going to be delivering training, you want your participants to be able to see you, right? So make sure that you are well lit. And honestly, from a financial standpoint, the investment in a ring light is really not very significant at this point. You can get them on Amazon for 10, 15 bucks. And they are worth their weight in gold, honestly. All right, Joey, thank you very much.
If nothing else, you own a lamp, right?
What's that?
I said, if nothing else, you got to own a lamp, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have lamps available there in your house. Just move it a little bit closer, put it behind your camera, and bada bing, you're good to go. So let me go ahead and replace my virtual background. Video settings, virtual background. There it is. And boom, we're back in business. All right. And let me go ahead and reshare my deck. And we can quickly move on to the audio portion. Peyton, I'm curious to see how far apart the ring lights are with 7 monitors. So the way that I have my monitors set up, I have 2 little windows right here on either side of my camera that shine right in. I'll take a picture and send it to you personally at some point. Deck, there we go. So let's talk quickly about audio. So, obviously when you're working from home, there are all of those environmental distractions. Again, 2 dogs, 2 cats, 2 kids, and a wife upstairs pounding around, dropping stuff. It's distracting and it creates noise. So first step, obviously, let the people in your home know that you're going to be doing a virtual event, and as much as possible to try to minimize any noise that they may make. If you're in a place where you can close the door to that space, definitely close the door, right? Do whatever you can proactively to try to avoid that background noise. When it comes to your microphone, guys, not all microphones are created equally. And if you're using just the built-in one that came with your desktop or laptop, it was provided by the lowest bidder when they were building out that platform. So don't trust it to be of the highest quality. Ultimately, you want to try to speak as closely as you can and feels comfortable with your microphone that gives you the best sound possible. So practice with your microphone. Jump into your own Zoom by yourself, record yourself at several distances, at several angles, and listen back to it, right? Watch your game film, or in this case, your audio from your game film, so that you can figure out what the best settings are for your microphone that you personally have. Now, I invested in a Blue Yeti. Some people poo-poo it. I absolutely love it. It's got some directional settings on it that work really, really well for me. So I highly recommend and endorse a Blue Yeti, but it's not the end all be all. There are a lot of really fantastic microphones out there, but no matter what one you use, take the time to practice with it so that you know and understand what the best way to use it is for your virtual events. And ultimately, again, when we're going back to the Moravian communication model, make sure that you're aware of your pace as you're speaking, right? It's really important that you're not speaking too fast or too slowly, but you also want to modulate your pace from time to time, because if you're just talking at the same pace and have the same tone the entire time throughout, you're going to turn into Charlie Brown's teacher, and it's just going to be wah, 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 wah. Joey used a Blue Snowball, and yep, your audio sounds really good. So that is another recommendation, obviously, that we can make from personal experience.
And if I could add as well, Bernie,
Dave,
a
yeah.
point about the directionality, right? Like some folks don't like to have headphones on their head, so they'll use computer speakers. You need the directionality once you start using those computer speakers, or else you're going to echo back to your audience and stuff. A shotgun microphone tends to work decently for that.
Great addition, Dave. 100% accurate. If I didn't have the directional capabilities on this Blue Yeti, I would absolutely have my stereo headphones on and like Joey does right now, right? So this obviously is a lot more comfortable not to have those microphones on. So again, having that directional capability is very important if you don't want to use a headset. And obviously the echoing component is very important as well.
Yeah, to that point, Bernie, the Blue Snowball, at least the generation that I have, does not have directional capabilities. So that's Dave's concern is very real for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, Peyton, to your earlier point, people will tolerate bad video. They will not tolerate bad audio. I'm going to say that again. People will tolerate bad video. They will not tolerate bad audio. And as Joey and I were preparing for the event today, he brought up a great point, and I'm actually going to pause for a second and let him say what he said earlier.
Sure. So think about streaming services, right? Whenever you start to lose bandwidth, what do they take away first? They take away your video quality, because they know they spend billions of dollars researching how to suck you into that platform. And they know you won't leave if it goes from 4K to 720p for a little bit. But if it sounds like crap, you're out of there. And it's just the same thing in virtual trainings.
Yep, absolutely. 100% true, guys. People will tolerate bad video. They will tolerate it, but they will not tolerate bad audio. I know that's true for me. If I'm watching a video on Netflix and all of a sudden it gets, a little grainy, I'm like, okay, I can deal with it. But if all of a sudden the audio drops out or it doesn't line up with what's happening on camera, I'm out. Forget about it. I will turn off the video and then come back to it later, hoping that it fixes itself, right? So be thinking about those things because they are important. All right, now the last category in lights, camera, action is ultimately your energy and your attitude, right? When you're facilitating, guys, if you're doing it in person, we show up to those in-person events, we're walking the room, we have high energy levels, adrenaline's pumping, we're feeling good. But then if you do a virtual event, oftentimes you're forced to sit down, right? And so I see all the time people come into these virtual events and their body language says, I'm bored, and they're at maybe 50% energy level, and it's just blah. Well, because you're not in person and because you're not able to leverage all of your body language, you've got to take your energy level up to 125%, right? If an in-person event is 100, a virtual event should be 125 because that is the way that you ultimately are communicating here. They can't see all of your body language. So part of that 55% that typically comes from body language transfers over to tone and pace and the words that you use. And if you're not delivering with high energy, you will start to lose people, right? If you have the opportunity, highly recommend standing when you're delivering. I personally don't have a standing desk, but a lot of people do. And if you have that as an option, always stand when you're presenting. Furthermore, again, body language speaks. Make sure that you are accentuating your facial expressions. And me, personally, I'm Italian. I talk with my hands all the time. If I'm not talking with my hands, I am not communicating effectively. So if that's you as well, again, occasionally bring your hands up into frame, use them to communicate. And then lastly, be open to and encourage participation as much as possible from the participants within your event, right? Because if you're giving your energy and you're bringing them to your energy, they will ultimately have more energy as well, right? They will be that much more engaged with you. All right, just reviewing my notes, make sure that I'm not missing anything. Oh, one other thing, try to eliminate slang and jargon as much as possible from your virtual event. Really any speech, unless you know factually that the audience is going to be familiar with the things that you're talking about, okay? Yes, that covers everything. Okay, cool. So let's move along. This is a knowledge check. So Joey, go ahead and drop the next polling question. While on camera, what should you be considering for background and lighting? There we go. All three answers. And all three of you are correct. Yes, it is all of the above, guys. You want to make sure that you have a neutral and uncluttered background. You want to face your light source to avoid the witness protection look. And again, avoid any bright lights behind you that can cast that shadow over your face. Well done. And thank you. So kind of pulling back the curtain a little bit, guys, you may have noticed, and we're going to jump into the next section here momentarily, that I have been having you guys do something every once in a while, right? Sometimes it's dropping something in chat. Sometimes it's asking you to respond to a polling question. Guys, you want to have people doing things throughout the course of your event. There are far too many distractions that are going on around people to just listen to you talk for an hour. So again, we're going to jump into all of the stuff that you can do in your virtual environment. And Chris, I see you chatted in. Like you said, lights to the side of your face, especially if you wear glasses. Great point. Because if they are to the side, you're less likely to get the reflection, which ultimately you can't see the eyes then, right? So thank you for bringing that up. That's a really, really good point as well. All right. Get back to this. All right. So let's now talk about leveraging the platform features for engagement. And yes, it changes the angles of the glasses to not reflect. Yep, precisely. So this is a video that I like to watch just for fun oftentimes, but I'm going to share it with you guys here. Let me make sure my sound is playing. There we go. Good. And it really accentuates a point that I'm about to make. So let me go ahead and play it.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take
we're
a
trying look. Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that. I think if you click the up arrow next to this.
So again, that video, I've watched it literally 1,000 times and it makes me laugh every time. The guy in the top right corner with the white hair, he's obviously not paying attention or engaged at all. And then all of a sudden, the guy in the lower right, who's the cat, says, I'm not a cat. And he looks up and he's just got this shit-eating grin on his face. Absolutely, I love it every time. Why do I play this? Guys, don't be Rod Pontoon, the Catman there. You need to be really, really careful about using features within Zoom that you aren't familiar with and or haven't practiced with. And a side caveat to that, be careful about letting your kids play with your Zoom account, because again, they can enable or disable features that you may need or not want to use in your next virtual event. So be really aware of that. And ultimately, whatever features you're going to use, take the time to practice with them and understand how they're going to work. Because the last thing you want to do is launch a feature and have it do something that you don't know ultimately what the result is going to be. Okay. All right. So yet another polling question. This is our third and final polling question of the day. What is your confidence level in using the virtual platform features to engage your audience? All right, all three moderates. Joey, go ahead and end and share. So again, my goal ultimately is to take you guys from moderate to a higher level by sharing a couple of nuggets with you here. So these are the standard virtual platform engagement features that are available to everyone in the paid version of Zoom, okay? These are your breakout rooms, your polling questions, chats, screen sharing, recording, whiteboards and annotations, reactions, raising hands, which is also a reaction, and then, of course, the audio and video components. So we'll quickly break down each of these in just a few brief words, because I am aware of time. And again, one of my pet peeves is always starting and ending on time. So we will be finished by 6:30 p.m. Eastern. So breakout rooms, number one, I love breakout rooms. They allow you to split your participants into smaller groups for discussions or activities, and really enables a more focused and interactive conversation within the meeting. One of the reasons that I love it is you can give your participants a task to do, send them off to do the task without you, as the leader of that meeting, looking over their shoulder, right? So they feel a little bit less stress about being evaluated on the spot. But secondarily, and frankly, more selfishly, gives you a minute to go and take a break, get a drink of water, use the restroom. Love breakout rooms. Polling questions. Obviously, we've done 3 of them. The polling question feature allows you to create single choice, multiple choice, fill in the blank, ranking order polling questions that participants can then respond to in real time to give you a temperature check or a knowledge check or a pulse check, right? They're great for gathering opinions, conducting quizzes, or just ultimately creating another engagement opportunity with some interactive content. So I highly recommend using polls whenever available. Now, that doesn't mean do 27 polls in your meeting, because you can overuse stuff. And I've seen that happen before, Donnie. But definitely use polls. Chat. Chat is an engagement feature in Zoom. It ultimately enables your participants to send text messages between themselves individually, right, and privately, or to the greater group, right? Obviously, we've been using the chat feature a little bit throughout the course of our event today, but again, it can be used for real-time Q&A, group discussions. You can share links, you can share files, but again, it just gives you another opportunity to engage with your participants. But again, remember, if you're going to ask people to share in chat, you better recognize that they are putting stuff in chat and actually read it as a facilitator. All right, next one, screen sharing. Screen sharing ultimately allows the hosts and participants to share what is on their screen. So that could be your PowerPoint deck. That could be a website where you're going to be doing demos. It could be other engagement tools that you could potentially use. And we'll talk about a couple of those on the next slide. But screen sharing is an engagement feature, because if you're just on screen for an hour the entire time, not sharing any visual content, people will get bored and they will leave. Okay. So that also doesn't mean you want to be in slide share mode for the entire hour. You want to occasionally bring them out of the slide share and bring them back into a gallery mode so that they can see each other from time to time. It's called a pattern interrupt. You want to change things up every once in a while so that people don't get too focused on just doing one thing and again, kind of trail off into la la land. The next 2 I'm going to talk about in tandem, which is whiteboarding and annotations. Most of you are probably familiar with the activity of whiteboarding. And let me start by saying I love the activity of whiteboarding. I am not a fan of the whiteboarding functionality within Zoom. It's just not my favorite. But whiteboarding and annotations allows you to collaboratively draw or write or stamp on your content that you're sharing on screen. I'm a big fan of annotations. Annotation allows participants to share on the deck that you're actually sharing. And that could be, again, written words, it could be text, it could be drawings. I'm a big fan of the stamp feature. If you're not familiar with it, what you do is click on the tiny little pencil icon that you might be seeing in my shared screen, or at the top of your screen, it says you're viewing Bernie DeSantis' screen. If you click the little ellipses, you will see an option that says annotate, and that will pop up the toolbar. And that will then allow you to select from multiple functions. And again, in this case, I'm going to choose the stamp. And as you can see, Joey is hearting the breakout rooms. You can choose one of the random stamps that they have in here. And then I could ask you, which of the features that you guys see on screen right now is your favorite? Put a heart next to it. For me, it's going to be annotations. It's not, but I'm going to say annotations. And so then you can put all of that stuff in. One of the great things about polling questions, chatting, and annotations and whiteboarding is it allows engagement from people who may not necessarily want to be on camera or come off mute and to participate verbally, right? So you can get your wallflowers engaged and involved in the conversation as well, simply by using these features. Now, I will add that you also want to make sure to tell your participants to close the annotation tool when you're done using it, because you can then end up with a bunch of errant stamps or stuff in your presentation throughout the course of it. So please go ahead and click the red X on your annotation toolbar to close the annotation tool. Thank you. All right, the next one, reactions and emojis, right? We are in the social media age, gentlemen. People use emojis and reactions every single day on every single social media platform. Zoom provides participants with various reaction icons and emojis that can be used to express agreement, applause, confusion, laughter, and so many other things. So they add a touch of interactivity and a little bit of personalization, and again, engagement during the meeting. So if you want to, thank you, Peyton. If you want to regularly ask some closed-ended questions, and then ask your participants to use a reaction button to tell me how you feel about whatever it is that you just asked or share, right? It's an easy way, again, to encourage participation without having them specifically come off of mute. In line with reactions and found in the same place is going to be your raise hand feature. And again, you can ask an overhead question and say, you know, if you agree, or if you think A is the correct option, please raise your hand, right? And then they can go ahead and raise their hand. And then you can say something like, if you'd like to come off of mute, please raise your hand and I'll go ahead and call on you, right? So again, this allows for a little bit more interaction without necessarily somebody coming off of mute, but it does allow them to indicate if they want to come off of mute at times. So getting towards the tail end here, guys, audio and video sharing, right? Again, just being on camera is engaging. Having good audio is engaging. Your participants can themselves share their audio and their video. Sharing any type of content is engaging. So you want to make sure that you are utilizing multimedia where appropriate. Again, don't overdo it, but occasionally sharing a video to accentuate a point is a good way to do a pattern interrupt and create more engagement. I think that we would all agree that you each smiled a little bit about that video, which brought you back into the conversation, right? The last one I want to touch on is recording. Obviously, we are recording today, and Zoom gives you that option to do so, which includes both the audio and the video, as well as the shared content. It allows you to send out the recording to people who maybe couldn't attend, or even the people who did attend, allow them to go back to that content and re-review things that maybe they weren't as dialed in on. But I would actually argue that recording is a disengagement feature. And the reason that I say that is when people know you're recording, oftentimes they are less inclined to participate because they don't want that recording shared out to the world. If they embarrass themselves in any way, shape, or form, they don't want anybody else seeing it. So if you don't have to record, don't record, because that will create more engagement within your virtual event. But I will also say the flip side of that is, again, I'm a big fan of watching my own recordings back, right? Watching my game film if I were an athlete, so that I can see where I can do better throughout the course of it. So there is pluses and minuses to it. But if you don't need to watch your game film, if you don't plan on sharing it afterwards, don't record the event, and that will increase engagement from your participants. So I'm going to go ahead and pause for a second, take us out of screen share. We've got just about 10 minutes left in our event today. Is there anything that I've said that you have questions about? Comments, questions, concerns, even angry outbursts are okay.
It was good, Vern. It was a good overview of a lot of the stuff that's super important. You simplified it to the point where it was easy rules and kind of easy things to remember. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, and sometimes it can lead to herding cats, but I'd like to try to get the audience to drive the session a lot too, by asking questions to them and having them share between themselves. Okay, you know, what are your problems? We're looking for a solution. What are your problems? What do you find? And then they can get talking between themselves, and they understand each other's problems a little bit more. And that allows you as the facilitator to get a broader view of kind of where you need to go and what you need to hit on. But it does help for the conversation between the participants.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dave. And I agree with you 100%. You know, obviously I have a lot of content to share today. But typically I try to get my participants as much as possible to engage with each other and with me throughout the course of the event. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you for adding
Absolutely.
that.
It depends on the topic too. You know,
Absolutely.
I mean, if you're just pushing information, it's one thing. If you're there to solve problems and help people come together, it might be useful.
Yep, I agree. I agree. Thank you for that. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. All right, guys, we're in the home stretch here, so bear with me just a few minutes more and we will land this plane. All right, so we talked about the basic features that are available within everyone's standard version of Zoom, right? However, Zoom, they do a whole lot of stuff, and there are a ton of apps. And did I hide that slide, Joey? I may have. Let me just come over to it and unhide it. Nope, it is the next slide. So, guys, the high level tip ultimately, and again, you've seen me do this throughout the course of today, is that you want to have your participants do something in the platform every 5 to 10 minutes or so, right? We are, again, in the social media age, the TikTok generation. People have very short attention spans. So you need to have them do something every 5 to 10 minutes to get them to re-engage here in the platform. And again, to my earlier point, that doesn't mean doing 10 polling questions and nothing else throughout the event. You want to have some variety. So maybe that's 2 or 3 polling questions. Maybe that's a breakout room. Maybe that's playing a video. Maybe that's having them do some things in chat. Maybe it's asking them to come off of mute. But in an hour-long event, you should have them do something at least 6 times throughout the course of it. And if you do that, you're more likely to keep people engaged in the content that you're sharing with them, right? Throughout the course of this, I believe we're sitting at about 8 touch points for engagement. All right, so this is the slide that I thought was before that slide, but apparently it's after that slide, and that's okay. So these are some of the additional tools that are available in the apps section of Zoom. So there's things like Mentimeter and Kahoot, Mural and Poly and Miro boards. Some of them are simple whiteboarding and collaboration tools. Kahoot is actually a way to gamify your events a little bit. I really love it. It creates like a game show type of feel. Obviously, these are not tools that are appropriate for every content or subject matter, but if you have the opportunity to leverage them, absolutely recommend that you do. I'm a big fan of Poll Everywhere as well, because that is not strictly a virtual thing. If you're doing in-person events, you can create a poll everywhere, which will give you a QR code that people can go to from their phone in your live in-person event, and they can still do polling questions that way. So absolutely love it. Highly recommend it. All right, guys, the tail end. Here we go. Filling your seats. How do you get people to show up to your virtual events? Well, really, I've found 4 ways to be effective. Networking. Every single person that you talk to in a virtual coffee one-on-one, you should be talking about your virtual event. You don't have to be pitchy, but you should tell them what you're doing as part of your explanation of who you are and what you do, right? Every single person that you talk to should know if you're doing an event next week, hey, Peyton, great chatting with you. Just want to let you know that I'm doing an event next week. Would love it if you can attend. No pressure. You'd be shocked how many people show up just because you talked a little bit about it. If you are able to do email marketing, definitely email out invitations to your event. Just let people know that you're doing the event, make it really easy for them to register, send them the registration link, and bada bing, people will start to show up to your events. Always recommend doing social media posts on any and all platforms that you are present on. Me personally, I am on all of them. I am not a consumer of social media necessarily, but I have come to recognize that the people who are entering the workforce right now are on all of the social media platforms, the TikToks, the Instagrams, the blah, 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 blah. So if you are trying to promote your event, be there on those platforms. And again, you'll be shocked at the number of people that ultimately will show up. In that same vein, LinkedIn is a phenomenal tool, especially if your events are of any sort of business nature or relevant to people who are doing business. So I'm going to just really quickly show you a quick demo of how to invite people on LinkedIn. So not going to walk through creating an event, but once you have your event created on LinkedIn, you go to your events page. You go to the specific event. Once you are on the event page, you go and click the share button. You then click invite, and that will bring up a little pop-up box that allows you, and right now I've invited a bunch of people to this specific one already, so you don't see the radio buttons, but there will be a radio button next to every single person here. And you can invite up to 1,000 people per week directly. That person will get an invite to your event. Now, the invites that are sent out look like every other notification on LinkedIn. So some people will click accept simply on accident or just because they like the title. Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to go to your event, look at all of the details and see what it's about. But they will, and oftentimes, click accept. And that, in and of itself, shows that they are at least somewhat interested in your event. And that then gives you the opportunity to reach out to them, start follow-up, and do more direct messaging. So I'll go to this one. See, I have 23 people signed up for this one tomorrow. There are a few people that, yes, I am already connected with, but I don't know Kathy. I don't know Marcus. So this now gives me an opportunity to connect with them and have some conversations very specifically about the content that I'm sharing in the event, but even more so create a relationship so that we can talk about some of the other services that I may offer as well, right? This is a great way not only to get people to come to your event, but also to continue building out your LinkedIn network. Right. So here in the final 2 minutes, guys, what's a new best practice or tip that you're going to use going forward? All right. Lessons learned. Is there anything that I've shared today that you have found valuable? If you would, please just quickly drop it into the chat. Yep. Good stuff, Peyton. Absolutely. Dave, yep, using more platform features. Yeah, and again, like I said, you want to use them, don't overuse them, but there are a lot of them that you can potentially use. Chris, using apps. Yeah, absolutely. And guys, honestly, I'm a big fan of demos as well, like I just did, right? Just going to a website, walking people through that process, and then having them themselves go to that website and do the exact same thing that you showed them. Again, it's engaging, and any type of activity draws them back into the conversation that you're having. Okay. So that brings us to the end of facilitating virtual training that doesn't suck. Last quick note, guys. I am running a 12-week masterclass, which very specifically is on all of the subject matter and very much more than what we've covered today. So if what we've talked about resonates with you and you're interested, obviously would love to chat with you, have you join. No pressure. If it makes sense for you, we'd love to have you.